Hello fellow gun strategists, my name is Danny Stone and thank you for joining me today for another episode of Imperator Academy, the Imperator Rome tutorial guide series. This time, this video will be on the topic of buildings. This guide was requested by John, so a big shout out to you my dear man. Anyway, this video will be divided into two parts. Why this, might you ask? Well, for those who do not know, the game has two types of localities, the settlement and the city. Both types of localities have access to different types of buildings, hence the reason why I have divided the video into two parts, settlement buildings and city buildings. For those who do not know what the difference is between the two types of localities, I do advise you to check out the Cicero guide I did a while back, where I go over all the differences between settlements and cities in detail. The link will be in the description below for those who want to check that out. Anyway, now all that boring intro gibberish stuff has been said, and hopefully you guys are still alive and not 10 feet underground, but still tuning into the video, so let's start learning. First of all, let's go over the different building types in the settlements. Luckily, there are not that many available to build, and they only number 6. Anyway, let's get started. So I'm just going to click on any random settlement. I'll just try and find one. Let's go a mile down here, the settlement. Yes, it is a settlement, and just for those who don't know how to build, just click on the build button here under the settlement buildings, and you will see the different buildings pop up. So first of all, we have the fortress building. This surrounds your settlement with some walls, making sure that the enemy does not take over the settlement like a hot knife through butter. The fort makes the enemy have to siege down the land to take it. The forts cost 0.5 gold to maintain per month. It is worth noting that fort costs don't scale. What do I mean by this? Well, let's say in a city, for example, you wanted to build that second fort. It would not cost you an extra 0.5 gold per month to maintain. Why build a second fort, might you ask? Well, if you increase the fort level, you increase the amount of enemy troops needed to siege the city. Each fort level requires 5,000 soldiers to start the siege phase. This means that having 2 forts, or a level 2 fort as we call them in the game, means the enemy will require 10,000 soldiers to be able to siege. It would be 15,000 soldiers for a level 3 fort and so on. Each level extra requires an extra 5,000 soldiers to siege. Please note that it is not possible to have a level 2 fort in settlements because settlements only have access to 1 building slot. You can see this here, just see settlement buildings 0 out of 1. So in the settlement of Amar, I think it's called, I have no buildings out of a total of 1. So you cannot get that extra fort level there. People, you'll probably go that, well, why don't you just click on the extra infrastructure building spending? Where is it here? Promote infrastructure spending. Okay, this means that the province of Rutibus gains state infrastructure city building slots plus 1. The clue here is the city building slots. It would only apply to the cities and not to the settlements. Where to build these forts, might you ask? Well, the very first place I like to build my forts is on top of my cities. Why do that, might you ask? Well, I like to do them on the cities because they tend to protect my pops. What do I mean by this? It means that when the enemy comes to try and occupy the city, of course, with the fort on, you have the siege phase and the siege timer, and you have to kind of take over the fort in order to take the city. As you guys probably know, that when a land is occupied by an enemy, there is a certain chance of pops being killed or enslaved, and since cities concentrate the juicy pops, which are citizens and freemen, so citizens providing you with tech and commerce income, and the freemen providing you with your manpower, well, I tend to like to protect them, because the fort on there makes the enemy have to siege it down, and then, once they're sieging it down, it gives me time to kind of intervene and break the siege to stop you from losing the pops. The second place I like to build my cities are in choke points, so strategic choke points. I'll just go onto the terrain map mode here, simple terrain map mode, and zoom up here. And a good example is in the Alps. Now, as you can see, you have a few sort of passages through the mountains. The rest, this light grey here, is all impassable terrain. The only passable terrain here is through this dark grey little bits of corridor here. And let's say if I was playing Rome and I controlled all of Cisalpine Gaul, I would like to build these forts on these choke points. I would probably have built one here on Skingo Margus there, and I would have probably built one up here as well on Sumus Lacus. All these to kind of funnel the enemy through 1 or 2 channels. It means that they get stopped on that fort and they cannot advance further. They're ideal choke points. The last place I tend to build forts is places bordering barbarian power. Now I just need to go to the barbarian power map mode here to show you guys what I mean. Now if you click on the barbarian power map mode, and it will show you all the locations where barbarian power is kind of present. Now, what do I mean by barbarian power? This is the places where barbarians spawn. They're generally on the edges of the civilized world, which means the places that aren't civilized, or not civilized a lot, will tend to spawn barbarians, and these barbarians spawn on these barbarian spawn locations. Now, I am playing as Carthage here, so the good thing, well, what I would like to do with these forts, I like to build them on the border with these barbarian locations here to stop them from coming in and pillaging my land. The forts stop the barbarians coming over into my land, so they come over and they're blocked by the fort, which gives me enough time to send an army to defeat them before they pillage my land and reduce my civilization value. As you can see, I'll just quickly show you guys a fort if I can find one. So here, the barbarian power, there was 2 located here. As you can see, I've got 3 forts bordering it. I've got 1 in Retubis, 1 in Huuzia, and 1 in Medakra, whatever it's called. I'm just going to call it Medakra. And this is just all designed to stop these barbarians. Now that we've gone over forts and what they do and where to build them, next up is the barracks building located under the fort. They increase pop capacity by 20%, which basically means that you can fit more people into the settlement. It also increases your local manpower by 20% and local freeman happiness by 20%. The freemen being the pops that generate your manpower. The happier your freemen are, the more they produce. But now you guys are going to say, Dan, why build barracks if there are never any freemen in my settlements? Well, simply put, the barracks also increase the desired freeman ratio in the settlement by 15%. Settlements only have slave ratios in them if there's nothing built in them. I mean, they only have slave ratios, nothing else. To see this, just click on the View Pops button, and here you just go to all the classes, and under you have a bunch of numbers. As you can see, in the settlement of Amar, I have 0% citizen ratio, 0% freeman ratio, 0% tribesman ratio, but 100% slave ratio. All settlements have an optimal slave ratio of 100%. This means that if there are any other type of pops like citizens, freemen or tribesmen in a settlement, they will automatically demote into slaves over time. The barracks gives an extra 15% to freeman ratio, which means the settlement will promote slaves into freemen until the 15% of the settlement's pops are freemen. It's like, if I built that barracks under this optimal freeman ratio in Amar, it would be increased from 0 to 15%, and then pops will start promoting and demoting to hit that optimal ratio of 15%. I honestly very rarely build barracks because when I play wide, which basically means murdering and slaughtering your way to the top, pretty much like the Romans really did in real life, you have a really large empire, which means you gain a lot of manpower because you have so many freemen. The only time I would ever consider building barracks in settlements is if you want to play tall, which is quite like a midget bodybuilder on steroids. Small, but powerful. This is to complement your small manpower pool and recovery speed because you are playing with limited territory. Now the next 3 buildings I will group together and call them economic buildings. These buildings are the slave estate, the mine, and the farming settlement. All 3 of these buildings, they grant plus 25% to pop capacity, which means that you can fit more pops in the settlements. The mines and the farming settlements also reduce the slaves needed for surplus by 5, which means you need fewer slaves to produce an extra trade good in the settlement. This means more potential goods to export, which also means more cash. The farms also make the settlement produce 50% extra food, meaning that the province has more food, which in turn means you can maintain more pops in the province. The last economic building, so the slave estate, also increase pop capacity by 25%, and just like farms, they increase food produced by 50%, but the best thing they do is the whopping plus 40% to slave output, which means they produce more. That is extremely powerful in settlements with a ton of slaves. It's basically like having a factory filled up with pumped up communist workers in the Soviet Union producing a T-34 tank a day during World War II. No offence intended to any communists still producing T-34 tanks, or any communists for that matter. No, really, none whatsoever. I apologise. Joke aside, I recommend building these 3 buildings wherever you can. Fill your boots with them. They are extremely powerful and you will not regret building them. The next building on the list is the tribal settlement, and by God, where do I begin? Just do not build them. They increase pop capacity by 25%, tribal happiness by 20%, and tribesman output by 40%. There's only really one time I can think of using this building, and it's if you are playing a migratory tribe or a tribal nation with no ambition of civilizing the nation. The best solution is to hope that Will Smith arrives and erases your memory, and just basically forget about them. The last settlement building we can see is the Provincial Legation building, and this is something that I think is extremely underused and can work wonders if used correctly. They increase pop migration speed by 75% and pop assimilation speed by 0.2. But you're now going to ask me, when and why should I build something that makes my pops migrate away from the territory? Well, first of all, you can build them in settlements that you have just conquered that don't have your culture, because it increases the pop assimilation speed. Don't worry about the pop migration thing in settlements that only have slaves, because slaves cannot migrate of their own free will. They can only be moved by the player. The second reason is, and it's by far the most important, and it's just so underused, it's if you're playing a tribe and you want to civilize them by getting rid of the tribal pops, by turning them into freemen or citizens, this building is absolutely fantastic. Have you ever noticed that tribesmen in settlements take forever to promote or demote? The best solution is to pull them away from the settlements and into your cities where they promote and demote way faster. However, it also takes ages for them to migrate to the cities, and this is where the Provincial Legation building really comes into its own element. Coupled with the centralised POPs governor policy, which increases pop migration speed by 1.2 per month, the Provincial Legation building is devastating if you are a tribal nation aspiring to more civilised things, like no longer living in huts made of animal excrement and mud. Settlements have a minus 75% to migration speed, and the Provincial Legation building removes this restraint, allowing for way faster migration, allowing you to pull those horrid tribals into your cities, and once they arrive they shave the beards, put on a nice toga, and hey, they're all civilised. Once you pull them out the hovels and into the cities, just change the governor policy to social mobility to increase pop promotion speed and watch those tribals shave their goddamn beards off. Okay, now that settlement buildings have been handled, let's move on to the city buildings, which are way more numerous, and they number 15 buildings to choose from. For organisational purposes, I have decided to split the buildings into 6 categories: economic buildings, tech buildings, pop ratio buildings, military buildings, cultural and religious buildings, and other. Now, I'm just going to click on any city. I'll probably just go on my capital here, to be honest, Carthago, and that's just the city, and click on build. And as you can see, there are way more buildings to choose from. So let's start with the economic buildings, which are the tax office and the marketplace. The tax office increases local tax by 10%, and the marketplace increases the city's commerce value by 25%. This is where you think it all sounds fantastically good on paper, but trust me, it's not. Right now, these buildings are pretty worthless, and the cash increase is really tiny, and it's just not worth it. It's probably like going out for a night out, chatting someone up for hours, getting really close to going home accompanied by someone, only for some random person to barge in and steal the show. You feel disappointed. Well, that is exactly what the tax office and the marketplace does. They build up your hopes, then destroy your soul. In order for it to be viable, you would need massive cities filled with tons and tons and tons of slaves and citizens. Trust me, it's more worthwhile to build other buildings than waste the limited building slots. Anyway, now we move on to worthwhile buildings. Hooray! In the tech category, the libraries and academies are a must. So the academy is here and the library is there. These buildings are the holy grail of buildings. I mean, they're fantastic. You cannot get enough of these. Libraries increase the desired ratio of citizens in a city as well as citizen happiness by 3%. Remember, citizens produce research points, and the more citizens you have in the realm, the quicker you will eat through the tech levels, and trust me, tech is king. Coupled with academies that increase pop promotion speed by 0.5 as well, and research points generated by the citizens by 7.5%, academies are fantastic, allowing you to promote the other pops way faster into citizens that the libraries increase the ratio of. So go forth, dear tech disciples, and construct these wonderful buildings. On a side note, citizens also produce commerce income, which means the more citizens you have, the more money you will make. So it's basically a win-win situation. Next up are the religious and cultural buildings. So these are the theatres, which is here, and the temple located there. The theatre increases pop assimilation speed by 1, and it also increases the happiness of the pops that are of your primary culture by 3% per temple. Per theatre, sorry. And the temple increases pop conversion speed by 1, and the happiness of the pops that are of the state's religion by 3% per temple. This is useful in recently conquered lands that are not of your religion and culture. Coupled with the assimilation policy in the conversion policy, these buildings are really powerful and can change the culture and religion of a province in no time. So this is what I tend to do if I conquer a land that is not my religion or culture. So I conquer it in my cities. I first build a load of temples, put the governor policy on convert. Then once the province is converted to a majority of the state religion, then I get rid of the temples, and then I build the theatres, and then I change it to the assimilation policy, and then once the pop's culture has changed to the state culture, then I consider the assimilation and conversion finished. It is really good, honestly. It's just a fantastic way to get your realm stable after a war, because when you conquer somebody who's not of your religion and culture, it tends to be slightly unstable, so your priority is to convert and then assimilate. For those who really want to know the details or why you should convert before you assimilate, I advise you to go and check out the first 6 Imperator Rome tips and tricks video I did a couple of weeks ago, where I go in detail why I choose conversion over assimilation first. Trust me, it is the way to go. Up next are the pop ratio buildings. In this category, we have the forum, which is located here, the mill, which is located all the way up there, and the library, which we already talked about, which is here. Basically, these buildings, they do the same thing that the library does for citizens, except that this time it's for freemen and the mill is for slaves. So each building increases the desired ratio of pops in the city. So for the buildings corresponding to the pop type, so mill for slaves, forum for freemen, library for citizens, while also adding happiness for each category. The only thing extra is for the mill, which also adds 3% extra to slave output, which means the slaves produce more money. But that's basically the essence of these pop ratio buildings. They increase the desired ratio of a certain pop type in the building, allowing for the city to promote and demote pops in order to hit the desired ratio, which you can increase depending on the building. So if you wanted more, let's say, research points, you would add some more libraries, which will increase the citizen ratio. If you wanted more manpower, you'll build more forums, which would increase the freeman ratio, therefore increasing the amount of freemen you would have in your city. And if you wanted more slaves, just build the mill, and that produce you more money, because the slave ratio would be increased, and therefore your city would try and get more slaves in the city. And the more slaves you have, well, the more money you produce. The following category that I've called the military section is comprised of the training camp, foundry and fort. So the training camp is located up here, the foundry there, and the fort here in the middle. I won't go into detail on the fort here because its function is exactly the same as in settlements as previously seen. The only difference is that in cities you can build multiple forts, which is where, when we talked about the fort levels in the when we were talking about forts and settlements, this is where that scenario applies. Anyway, the training camp increases local manpower by 10%, meaning that your maximum manpower will be increased as well as the manpower recovery ratio. This building is coupled well with the forum, which grants extra freeman ratio in cities, so it's useful if you want to build big manpower cities to replenish your armies. The foundry, on the other hand, increases your pops output by 1% per foundry, as well as increasing the starting experience of your soldiers that you recruit from the city by 5%. This is useful in provinces that you specialise into recruitment for your armies. So let's say you want to have a certain province which produces units with a lot of XP. Just build foundries in the cities of that province and build training camps and forums, and it will be your military and manpower hub, for example. Now we move on to the final category, what I have classed as other. Here we have the granary, which is located all the way over here. There we go, in the middle. And this increases the food capacity of the province by 200. This effectively means that you can store more food in the province. The more food you store, the more the fort defense is increased and the faster the pop growth will be. You can just see this by moving your mouse cursor over the green bar of the province food here, and you can see at the very bottom, depending on the amount of food stored, so the population here, you can see this province consumes 732 food every 12 months. Every 12 months of food stored will apply a bonus up to a maximum of 120 months. So here my effects from 12 months of food stored gives me local fort defense plus 2.5% and local pop growth plus 0.05%. This kind of makes sense really, because the more food you store, the longer you can withstand a siege, so obviously your fort effectiveness goes up, and the more food that there is, the more people can eat, and therefore the more the population grows. So it's kind of a neat mechanic and a neat thing, and I think it's really, really useful. The next building is the Court of Law, which is located up here, and it's a pretty simple building really. It increases your province loyalty by 0.02 per month. Your province loyalty is located at the very top here, next to the hand and the green bar, with the arrow going that way, going to like left to right, increasing it goes up, and if it was going from right to left, it would increase, it would go down, and it would see a decrease in this bar here. This can be really useful if you have a province with unhappy pops due to recent conquest of lands that are not the same religion and not as the same culture as you. However, to be very honest, I really rarely build this building because I never tend to really have any loyalty issues. If you quickly convert and assimilate, and if you assign governor armies for the conquered regions, you should really have no problem with loyalty. But if you do, it can be useful in a tight spot. Also, make sure your governor has low, if no corruption, and that is loyal to the leader. This will also make sure the province stays loyal, because the loyalty of the province can also depend if the governor's corrupt, which kind of makes sense really, because if the governor's a corrupt governor, well, the province is going to be less loyal, which is also very good. So yeah, just keep this in mind, that if you play your cards right, you will very rarely need to build the quarter floor buildings. Finally, we have the Aqueduct building, which is located at the very bottom. It's the very last one, and this is a very useful building. As well as increasing the pot capacity of a city, it also has a hidden side effect that people may or may not know about. It increases the migration attraction of the city. To see this, just hover the mouse cursor over the plus when getting ready to build the aqueduct, and you will see it increases migration attraction. Here it is. Actually, I can't build one there. I need to go to somewhere where I can build one. Here, for example, in Tapsa. If I move my mouse cursor over the build aqueduct, and you'll see the results pot capacity, okay, plus 4 from 25.37 to 29.37, but you'll also see migration attraction, okay, plus 2.75, so 15.37 to 18.12. So this is really hidden, because if you move your mouse cursor over the aqueduct here, you only see the pop capacity. However, if you move it over the mouse cursor, you'll see it, well, not the mouse cursor, but over the plus button, you'll see it increases migration attraction. So there you have it, guys. Major top tip of the day. Wow, I am absolutely knackered. That was a really long one today, but I felt I had to cover most things here and not cut any corners because of the sheer variety of buildings. I hope this thing kind of makes things a bit more clearer on what the buildings do and in which scenario you build a certain type of building. Anyway, I want to thank you guys so much for joining me, and if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you want to see more Imperator Rome content, make sure you also hit that subscribe button. I also wanted to thank all you guys for your support. I recently hit the 1,000 subs, which is massive. I never really would have expected this. For me, it is just fantastic, and it couldn't be done without you guys, and for that, I thank you. Thank you so much. Anyway, thank you again for joining me, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye for now.